What's going on, New York Giant fans? Welcome back to another video here on the Big Blue in the Bronx YouTube channel. Hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. Turn on post notifications so you know when a live stream pops or drops. Appreciate you coming back. I'll share this out. Use the SeatGeek code if you're going to a tailgate, concert, or ball game. $20 off SeatGeek with the promo code Big Blue in the Bronx. Again, share this out. 5 stars on Apple Podcasts too. So there's this narrative that's been going around on social media, more like a theory. And it's been within the last week. I've seen some videos pop about it, seen some tweets pop up about it, but I thought I ought to investigate it myself. So let's investigate it. The question is Daniel Jones a head coach assassin? Why or why not? So let's go through each of the coaches that he's been with, and there's been a few, obviously. Multiple offensive coordinators, multiple head coaches. We'll start with Pat Shurmur. 2018 had nothing to do with Daniel Jones, so let's just skip to 2019. And Daniel Jones, looking at the stats, had a pretty good rookie year. 24 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, over 3,000 yards. Completion percentage of 61.9, which isn't great. But he did have the turnovers. 12 touchdowns, and then going to the fumble category, which, of course, isn't great. He had 19 fumbles in his rookie year, and again, not good. I don't have the stats right now as to how many he lost, but anyway, 19 fumbles in his rookie year, and yeah, so there's that. But 19 fumbles in his rookie year, 12 interceptions. The interceptions, again, weren't really the problem except for some games. The Green Bay Packers game was one where he threw 3 interceptions. I think he threw 1 or 2 picks against the Bears. Let's see. Let's look at the stats down the list. He threw 2 interceptions against Washington. That's what I remember. He threw an interception against Minnesota. He threw 1 or 2 picks against New England, 1 against Arizona. He threw, I believe, 2 against Dallas the second time around. Didn't throw any against the New York Jets. Threw 1 against the Bears. At least I think. Maybe it was the second time around, but I'm pretty sure he threw a pick there. If not, he definitely turned the ball over. 3 picks against Green Bay. Didn't play in the Philadelphia or Miami game. Didn't throw an interception against Washington. And against the Philadelphia Eagles the last time, he did throw an interception. So, again, the interceptions and then the fumbles. But believe it or not, at least in my opinion, I don't think that was the reason for Pat Shurmur's firing. I think there was a couple of other things coordinated in there. And the offense improved just a little bit, in 2019 compared to 2018, consistent-wise, right? You didn't have Eli Manning back there except for 2 games. So actually, it was really 4 games just to get his record back to 500. And, of course, Daniel Jones was injured. But you had Golden Tate. You had a different couple of offensive linemen. John Jalapeno was back. Mike Remmers, Kevin Zeitler, all these different cats, and Evan Ingram, too. And also Saquon was out 3 games. But the real reason, in my opinion, that he was fired, meaning Pat Shurmur, is because of 2 reasons. Dave Gettleman threw him under the bus after the team regressed to 4-12 instead of 5-11. Remember, there was still 16-game seasons at the time. And mostly how bad the defensive unit was and how bad the coaching was. The offensive line, it got slightly better, but Hal Hunter was not a good coach. You look at the defense, again, James Betcher's unit was totally awful. 2018, the defense actually did well for the first half of the season. It held some teams to, a respectable amount of points. And then in the second half, it was just blowing it against the Eagles, nearly blowing it against the Buccaneers, blowing it against the Colts, blowing it against the Cowboys, and all these different things. So that's where a lot of us got scared. And at that point, we already knew we were kind of in a rebuild mode because they traded off Eli Apple, they traded off Damon Harrison, and all these sorts of things. So you come into the season, they drafted a bunch of rookies. They drafted Julian Love, they drafted Corey Ballantyne, they drafted a guy in DeAndre Baker, which obviously did not work out for the long run. Total bust on that note. But let's compare the stats. So 24th in total defense in 2018, 23rd in pass defense, 20th versus the run, and 23rd in points allowed in every category. Actually, let's go to the blitz percentage in the analytics first. 12th in blitz percentage, 20th in pressure percentage, and 30th in sacks. And James Betcher, you guys remember, came over as this, he's going to blitz type guy, and he's going to bring his guys from Arizona, Josh Morrow, Kareem Martin, all those different names. They didn't work out in a single pinch. And then 2019 was also weird because they let Landon Collins go, but they signed a very much aging Antoine Bethea. And they drafted all these rookies and all these different things. So, with that being said, 25th in total defense regression, 28th in pass defense regression, gave up the most explosive plays regression, 20th versus the run stationary, 30th in points allowed regression, and then the only parts where they kind of went up in pressure percentage, they went up to 14th, and sacks, they went up to 22nd in the league in sacks, and most of that was due to Marcus Golden. They also made the in-season trade for Leonard Williams. But again, most of Pat Shurmur's bye-bye was due to the fact that James Bettcher was a horrible defensive coordinator. And I don't think, not that the offense was elite, but the offense wasn't terrible to where, oh my God, Daniel Jones was the reason that Pat Shurmur got fired. I don't believe that at all. Like, we'll talk about Joe Judge, we'll talk about Brian Daboll, all these different things. But if you asked me, was Daniel Jones any part of the reason why Pat Shurmur got fired, I would say no. And moving on, we go to Joe Judge. They hired Jason Garrett as an offensive coordinator, and the offense was very bad. Very, very bad. 31st in total offense, 29th in passing, 19th in rushing, 31st in points scored. That's 2020. And a lot of people were calling for Jason Garrett's head because of the curl routes and the stick concepts and all these different things that, were very, very predictable on offense for the New York Giants. And they didn't have a running game till the end of the season with Wayne Gallman, Alfred Morris, and Dion Lewis, which is an interesting combo. But they actually got it going once again towards the end of the year. The offensive line started to gel in multiple ways more than one, but also they weren't very good when it came to allowing sacks. I think the Eagles and the Giants were like the top two in allowing sacks. Obviously they drafted Matt Peart. They drafted Andrew Thomas, who struggled. They drafted Shane Lemieux, who struggled. They still had Will Hernandez. They had Nick Gates starting at center. So a lot of, again, moving pieces for the New York Giants. And they had a pretty shitty receiver core. Now, it wasn't as bad as I would say maybe 2021 in terms of like production and whatnot. But Dante Pettis, Austin Mack, C.J. Board, Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, and Golden Tate. Slayton was the lead receiver. And then you had Caden Smith at tight end, which I thought she should have been used more. Evan Ingram, who his hands were like scissors. Not even scissors, more like spatula hands, and every time he touched the ball, it would go up for an interception. And then Levine Twilolo. But we're focusing in, of course, on Daniel Jones in 2020. So in 2020, 5-9 record as a quarterback. He also got hurt. I forget what injury it was. I think it was the hamstring injury. He got hurt against the Bengals. Colt McCoy filled in. The Giants won that game. He didn't play against the Browns. Did not play against the Seattle Seahawks. And he threw 11 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. And that interception stat line really got better as the weeks went on. And the fumble category actually got better as the weeks went on as well. He only had 10 fumbles. And with that being said, you go to the game log for 2024, Mr. Daniel Jones, and he had 2 interceptions against the Steelers, 1 against Chicago, 1 against San Fran, 1 against the Rams, had a fumble, scoop and score against Dallas, had an interception against Washington, had another interception against Philly, had 2 interceptions versus Tampa Bay, and had a fumble against Washington the second time around, but that's where things really started to clean up over the next couple of games. No turnovers against Philly, no turnovers against Cincinnati, did not play in the Seattle game, had, I believe, 1 or 2, I think it was 1 fumble on him that he did not recover. That was Marcus Golden recovering that, which is funny because the Giants traded him in season to the Cardinals then. Then Baltimore, he looked pretty decent, but again, the Giants lost 27-13, and he didn't turn over the ball. And then the last game, I would argue, is solely on Evan Ingram for the interception because it was right in the hands of Donovan Wilson. So now you take a look at 2021. They didn't upgrade the offensive line much. They brought back Nate Solder. They released Kevin Zeitler. They did a couple other things. They kept Nick Gates as the center. They brought in Ben Bredesen, Matt Skura, and obviously the offensive line was just an ongoing rotating mess. And the offense wasn't much better. Again, 31st in total offense, 31st in pass offense, 24th in rush offense, 31st in points offense. And to be fair, this not totally was on Daniel Jones because the second half of the year was the Jake Fromm, Mike Glennon saga. So you look at Jones's stat line against Denver. he had the one fumble, which was recovered by Denver, but he had one passing touchdown. So that game was pretty solid for Daniel Jones overall, but again, 13 points is not going to cut it. The next game was pretty good from Daniel Jones, one touchdown though. Again, low in passing touchdowns, didn't fumble or anything like that. Against Atlanta, didn't throw for a touchdown, threw for 266 yards, and he may or may not have fumbled that game. He did not. Actually, no, he fumbled twice. So my bad. He recovered both fumbles. Anyway, moved to New Orleans. Had a great game, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, but that was at halftime, and that was pretty much a Hail Mary situation. Against Dallas, that's where he gets hurt. 5 of 13, 98 yards. LA Rams, 3 interceptions, 1 fumble lost, so that was 4 turnovers in that game. Against Carolina, 1 touchdown, no fumbles, no turnovers. 1 interception against Kansas City, which was a big, big killer. That was, of course, when Jones threw it for Slayton on a stick concept, and it was picked off by Willie Gay. Then you move to against the Raiders, 1 fumble lost. That was when Matt Parrott gave up the sack. Jones should have been, obviously a little bit better in the pocket at that time. Then against Tampa Bay, 2 interceptions. One of them was like one of the worst interceptions I ever seen. And then no fumbles, 1 passing touchdown against Philly, and that was pretty much the end of his season. And the total stats on the year for Daniel Jones, 10 touchdowns, 7 interceptions to go along with 3 fumbles lost and 7 fumbles. So, again, another category where he got better in. The turnovers, it lessened from the year prior, but the problem is that the passing offense wasn't better, and the touchdown production wasn't better. Now, there are 2 sides of this. Obviously, for the first half of games, Jason Garrett was a horrible offensive coordinator, but there are games where Daniel Jones turned over the football in key situations and he couldn't get it done. Like against the Falcons, you do expect him to kind of take over that game and, make some throws. And of course, on film, which is something we usually don't get into, but on film, he was missing wide open receivers. So there's that. And then the reason towards the end of why Joe Judge got fired, because he initially was going to stay on. They were talking about bringing in Kevin Abrams as this temporary GM and all this sort of good stuff and having really Joe Judge call the calls. I thought personally maybe they would have either ran it back with Jones or they would have said, hey, let's get a new quarterback in here. And let's see, what was that, the 2022 class? So that wasn't necessarily the greatest class of all time in terms of quarterbacks, but the jury's still out on that. But as for Joe Judge getting fired, I do think to some extent Daniel Jones did play a part. Now, I don't think it was minimal, but I don't think it was all the way. Definitely like a 33% or maybe even under that, between, I would say, 10 to 30%, because Jason Garrett was a horrible offensive coordinator, though there are rumors that it was pushed on Joe Judge that Jason Garrett would be the offensive coordinator. Obviously, Daniel Jones' lack of production, but also down the stretch, the Giants were losing games horrifically. And I mean horrifically in blowout situations that you couldn't possibly imagine. You start with Miami. That was actually a pretty competitive game. It was 20-9. Los Angeles game, they were getting blown out in that game. Don't look at the score. It's 37-21, but it was a lot less closer. 21-6 against Dallas, 34-10 against Philly, 29-3 against Chicago, and 22-7 against Washington. After Chicago, Joe Judge came out with that speech. And of course, what happened after that? Washington beat us. The QB sneak. That's when Joe Judge got fired. So in terms of that, I would say he definitely played a role in Joe Judge getting fired. Now, let's take a look at the Brian Daboll, Mike Kafka era. I kind of mentioned it a little bit in the last video when we were talking about how Mike Kafka might not come back, Wink Martindale might not come back. But 2022, not much expectations on the table. The Giants obviously made the playoffs, and Daniel Jones made some improvements. 5 more passing touchdowns, 2 less INTs, lowest INT percentage of his career, 410 more rushing yards, 5 rushing TDs, 780 more passing yards. And Saquon Barkley helped them a lot. Did not get injured. Over 1,000 yards since 2019. A rotating offensive line, a bullshit receiving core. David Sills, Richie James, some of these other cats that were coming in as well. Marcus Johnson, Lawrence Cager, and also the emergence of Daniel Bellinger. But the offense overall, it wasn't great, but it was a step up from the last 2 years of Jason Garrett / Freddie Kitchens. 18th total, 26th in passing, 4th in rushing, and 16th in points. And one Negative you could obviously draw from that is some of the games where Daniel Jones did not show up and turned over the football. We could go to the game log, of course, against the Eagles, right? Especially that playoff game. He did not show up. He was terrible. Let's be completely honest with ourselves. He was terrible. 135 yards, an interception. The game against the Dallas Cowboys, he wasn't great. Missed some throws. He was okay in the tie game and the win game against Washington. The game against Detroit and Seattle, those were not good games by him at all. Baltimore, he was okay. Carolina, he wasn't great. Tennessee, he wasn't great. But also, he wasn't really getting over 200 yards per game. That's what the big bugaboo was, is like he wasn't throwing for 200 yards. He was throwing for $188, $179, $182, something like that. But you did see some improvements of less turnovers and stuff like that. And what we wanted to see coming into the next year was, more weapons, a solidified offensive line, and for him to step up to the plate with winning expectations. And of course, he didn't do that. The Giants didn't do that in 2023. Had a terrible game against Dallas. 2 interceptions. Had some missed throws. That one interception I would rather say is on Saquon Barkley, but the other one where he's trying to throw to Waller was a complete mess. Then you go to the game against Arizona. The interception he threw was to Saquon Barkley, but ended up in the hands of a defender. That I wouldn't blame on him, but the first half not scoring on Arizona, I think, yeah, you're the quarterback of the offense. You're the leader of the offense, $40 million. That in itself is why Daniel Jones is being blamed for that. Didn't think he had a great game, of course, against San Fran, where he had an interception, didn't throw for a touchdown. Again, it's a tough defense, and there was a lot of situations going in there without Saquon Barkley and whatnot. But you move on to the next game. This one was what set it off for me personally. It was like Daniel Jones is not the future of this franchise. He had a fumble lost. He took a lot of bad sacks and 2 interceptions. That's where it set off for me. Daniel Jones, not the future of this franchise. And the Giants need to draft a quarterback. He did okay, probably one of his better games outside of the second half against Arizona, against Miami. But he got hurt, 6 sacks taken in that game. Some were bad on him. There was a couple missed throws, but that's where he got injured with the neck. 3 games missed. Comes back against the Raiders, overthrows a lot of different folks. Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hyatt, and his knee buckles. The end of the season is there. And then, of course, you have the circulating report of Mike Kafka possibly not coming back for 2024, but also some variables to add. 3 different QBs in the offense. That's outside of Daniel Jones, too. Lack of a functioning rushing attack. Many different O-line combos, including the Andrew Thomas injury, which is key. Evan Neal not stepping up. Darren Waller being hurt. Daniel Bellinger not really stepping up, but again, that's due to the quarterback play, in my opinion. And the offense right now ranks 32nd in total offense, 32nd in passing offense, 14th in rushing, and 32nd in points. So let's come to this conclusion. Is the narrative real that Daniel Jones is a for sure assassin of head coaches in this league? I'm going to say no. He's not an assassin. I personally think that he obviously did his part to destroy his own career, wasn't making improvements in certain areas, and lack of production. I don't think he's a bad quarterback, but I think he's pedestrian to below average pedestrian. Like, he's not going to throw away a game, but he's not going to sit here and like, oh my God, he's going to wow you with these stats. He's going to win you the game. That's kind of the discussion we were having before 2022. Like, again, Pat Shurmur, the reason he was fired was not Daniel Jones. It was because James Betcher's defensive unit was horrible and the coaching was terrible. Joe Judge, that's where you put in a little bit of Daniel Jones's blame. Okay, 10 to 30%. Jason Garrett was a horrible offensive coordinator. A lot of people said that, including former players. And Joe Judge outed himself the last few games with the team being non-competitive. They didn't select the right backup quarterback, and that was actually on a report that Joe Judge wanted Mike Lennon in, while Dave Gettleman wanted to retain Colt McCoy, but that's a different story. So you could blame him for Joe Judge, and maybe Joe Judge could be a good head coach in this league. I think he could be, and don't take this out of context, but he could be like a Tomlin type, a Belichick type, to where the defense is probably the most relied on, and the offense is like mid, but that's how you win games. Obviously, that's not the future of the NFL, at least in my belief. But with that being said, I do think Joe Judge and Jason Garrett had more to do with their respective firings, and Jason Garrett, being fired and his bad offense having more to do with Joe Judge's firing rather than Daniel Jones. Because to be honest with you, I don't think Joe Judge would be this all-great head coach in this league. I don't think giving him a third year would have been beneficial for the Giants. Obviously, it seemed to be the right decision to move on from him. And I still think Brian Daboll's a good coach. Now, if Kafka does go, I do think that could be part because of Daniel Jones, because of his lack of production, at least to start the year. But at the same time, there's so many variables, the offensive line, the lack of production from certain units, Bobby Johnson being a part of that. So with that being said, I don't think Daniel Jones is an assassin of head coaches, but I do think he should be replaced next year, and the Giants should go first, second, third, whatever overall, and draft a quarterback. Like, comment, subscribe, folks. Do all the good stuff. Turn on post notifications so you know when the live stream pops video drops. Appreciate you coming back. Share this out. Peace out, guys. See you later. Stay cool.